Greetings, and thank you for engaging with this essential clinical discussion. If you are a woman in your 60s or beyond, I must emphasize that the physiological insights we are about to review constitute some of the most critical health parameters you will evaluate this year. This discussion transcends mere comfort. It concerns the fundamental preservation of your physiological architecture, your systemic vitality, and your neurobiological resilience. I am Dr. Lily Stones, a board-certified physician with over 30 years of clinical experience specializing in the holistic care of women, navigating the complex transitions of biological aging. Today, we shall address a subject sequestered in the medical shadows for far too long: the profound impact of intimacy, specifically autogenic self-intimacy, on a woman's systemic health as she matures. The case of physiological neglect, a clinical retrospective. Let me begin with a clinical case study. Recently, I was contacted by the daughter of a former patient, Charlotte. Charlotte had historically been a hallmark of vibrancy. She was cognitively sharp, vascularly stable, and possessed a profound emotional warmth. One morning, her daughter discovered her in her preferred armchair. She appeared peaceful, but she had reached the end of her life. The official cause of death was categorized under natural causes. However, as a physician who had monitored Charlotte's gradual physiological decline, I identified a different underlying etiology. Charlotte's vitality had not been compromised by a sudden, acute pathology or a catastrophic failure of a primary organ. It had slowly, quietly eroded due to years of physiological neglect, specifically localized in the domain of her pelvic, endocrine, and emotional health. Charlotte's trajectory is not an isolated case. Annually, thousands of women experience a similar, silent unraveling. This occurs not due to an inherent defect in the aging process, but because they are socialized by explicitly or implicitly ageist medical narratives to believe they are no longer required to nurture a vital part of their biological self, their intimate health. The truth about biological desires and advanced aging: for decades, the prevailing cultural and medical narrative suggested that human desire possesses an expiration date, that pleasure is a developmental phase we eventually outgrow. As a medical professional, I am here to correct that persistent misinformation with empirical evidence. Maintaining a functional connection to your body through healthy, respectful, and intentional self-touch is not only a natural human behavior, it is clinically critical. This is not a discussion about indulgence or hedonism. This is about the clinical preservation of microcirculation and pelvic vascular health, endocrine hormone system stability, neurochemical homeostasis, and emotional resilience. When a woman ceases all forms of sexual engagement, including autogenic self-pleasure, especially in the post-menopausal state, the body does not simply pause. It undergoes progressive atrophy. Tissue integrity, neurotransmitter levels, and pelvic floor tonicity all begin a downward trajectory. The most frequent sentiment I encounter in my clinical practice is, "Why was I never informed of the medical consequences of this cessation?" In this comprehensive review, I will detail 4 medically recognized consequences of the total cessation of self-stimulation in later life and, more importantly, the clinical steps you can take to mitigate these risks. Consequence 1: C. The progressive atrophy of vascular and vulvovaginal tissues. In medicine, we prioritize the principle of diffuse atrophy. Consider what occurs when a skeletal muscle is immobilized for an extended period. It weakens, its mitochondria decrease, and the muscle fibers shrink. These same biological laws apply to the specialized tissues of your pelvic region. The vaginal walls and clitoral structures are highly vascularized tissues. They require consistent blood flow and regular mechanical stimulation to maintain cellular health and turnover. According to data from the Mayo Clinic and the North American Menopause Society (NAMS), approximately 50% to 60% of postmenopausal women experience symptoms of genitourinary syndrome of menopause (GSM), previously categorized as vaginal atrophy. When these tissues lack arousal-based vasocongestion for extended periods, the lack of nutrient-rich blood flow leads to loss of elasticity. Collagen fibers in the vaginal rugae become brittle and less compliant. Tissue thinning, involution. The epithelial layers decrease in thickness, leading to increased fragility and risk of micro-tears. Cirrhosis and pH imbalance. A significant drop in natural lubrication and a shift in the vaginal microbiome, which can lead to chronic irritation and increased risk of UTIs. I recall a patient, Carol, age 71. She presented with high somatic anxiety, reporting that she hadn't felt comfortable in her own skin in years. When she eventually attempted to re-engage with her body, the experience was painful dyspareunia. Carol wasn't broken. Her tissues had simply adapted to a state of chronic inactivity and vascular stasis. Clinical intervention: light, respectful forms of arousal, even twice weekly. Promote local pelvic circulation and preserve the elasticity of the pelvic system. It is a form of vascular maintenance essential for long-term comfort and urogenital health. Consequence 2: the neuroendocrine vacuum and hormonal destabilization. A common clinical misconception is that hormones are only relevant during the reproductive years. However, the orgasmic cascade triggers a systemic effect on your hormonal landscape well into your 80s and 90s. When you achieve arousal and neurological release, your brain initiates a profound neurochemical discharge, oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone. It inhibits amygdala activity, fostering systemic calm, reducing circulating cortisol, and lowering blood pressure, a primary neurotransmitter that regulates mood, focus, and motor control. Endorphins, endogenous opioids that act as natural analgesics, significantly reducing the perception of joint and muscular pain common in aging. Without the regular triggering of this neurochemical cascade, many women experience a heightened state of systemic stress, elevated cortisol. In my practice, I frequently evaluate women complaining of chronic insomnia, irritability, and emotional flatness. They often seek pharmacological interventions such as antidepressants, yet the root cause is frequently a neuroendocrine vacuum caused by a total absence of intimate engagement. Self-stimulation is a medical tool for brain chemical balance and stress resilience. Consequence 30: pelvic floor dysfunction, prolapse, and incontinence. The pelvic floor is a complex of muscles and fascia supporting the bladder, bowels, and uterus. When functioning optimally, it ensures physical independence and psychological confidence. When it weakens, the results are clinically significant, affecting your ability to ambulate and interact socially without fear. Regular sexual activity, including the rhythmic contractions of orgasm, is a natural, involuntary form of somatic physical therapy. During the climax phase, the pelvic floor undergoes rhythmic, involuntary contractions. It is effectively an internal isometric workout that maintains muscle memory and tonicity. When this mechanical engagement disappears, the muscles lose their tone, on-demand capability. Clinical statistics indicate that urinary incontinence affects nearly 1/3 of women over age 60. I treated John, age 74, who had become socially isolated due to fear of bladder leakage, stress, incontinence. She believed it was an inevitable consequence of aging. In reality, it was muscle disuse atrophy. By reintroducing specific pelvic floor exercises and gentle self-intimacy, Joan regained her physical and social freedom. Studies supported by the National Institutes of Health (NIH) confirm that regular pelvic engagement significantly reduces the risk of pelvic organ prolapse and urinary dysfunction. Consequence 40: identity fragmentation and the fading effect. This final point is perhaps the least discussed in primary care medical textbooks, yet it is arguably the most life-altering. There is a subtle emotional fragmentation that occurs when a woman detaches from her somatic, intimate self. Women often report feeling faded, gray, or invisible. This isn't vanity, it is a clinical loss of somatic identity connection. Serotonin and cognitive identity. Regular intimacy helps regulate serotonin levels, which stabilizes mood and helps preserve cognitive function and mental sharpness. The invisible patient. I met Gloria, age 69, who described feeling like a shell. She hadn't engaged with her body in a decade, not due to shame, but due to psychological habituation. Reconnecting with her physical self reawakened her sense of purpose and agency. Clinical implementation. The protocol for reconnection, if it has been years or even decades since you engaged in this form of self-care, please understand, the human body remains responsive to intentional attention. Reconnection is a gradual process of neurological re-sensitization and vascular restoration. The weekly re-entry protocol. Phase 1: vascular restoration. Why? Utilize balanced vaginal moisturizer or a physician-prescribed estrogen cream to restore tissue hydration, pH balance, and epithelial thickness. Phase 2: some muscular integration. Implement daily Kegel exercises. Contract the pelvic floor for 5 seconds, release for 5. Repeat 10 times, 3 times daily. Phase 3: neurochemical activation. Practice mindful self-touch. Use a high-quality water-based or silicone lubricant to eliminate friction. Focus on the sensory input without the performance pressure of a specific end goal. Advanced biological considerations. The role of nitric oxide. It is also vital to discuss the biochemical messenger nitric oxide NOV. Arousal triggers the release of NO, which is the primary vasodilator in the human body. By engaging in regular autogenic intimacy, you are essentially training your endothelial cells to maintain their capacity for vasodilation. This has systemic implications. Healthy vasodilation is a key marker of cardiovascular health. When this pathway is neglected, the machinery of blood flow can become sluggish, potentially impacting more than just intimate comfort. The psychology of autonomy and ownership beyond the biomechanics. There is the issue of somatic ownership. When a woman takes time to care for her body in this intimate manner, she is sending a profound message to her limbic system. I am still present. I am still relevant. I am still deserving of physiological care. I recall Denise, age 76, who had been widowed for 15 years. She initially struggled with profound guilt, not because she felt she was doing something wrong, but because she felt her body was a relic of a past marriage. Reconnecting with her body allowed her to reclaim her identity independent of her status as a wife or a widow. She described it as finding her voice again. This is the transformative power of somatic reconnection. A clinical summary for the mature woman: intimacy is not an indulgence, it is the fundamental maintenance of the chemical, physical, and emotional systems that keep you whole. It is a vital sign of your overall physiological health. You are not past your prime. You are in a phase of biological evolution that requires a new type of clinical stewardship. I invite you to take a deep breath, place a hand over your heart, and acknowledge your body's enduring resilience. If this conversation has been professionally enlightening, please support our mission by subscribing and sharing this with a peer. Your health is not merely your resting heart rate or your cholesterol panel. It is the depth of your aliveness and the integrity of your connection to your somatic self. Take good care of yourself. You deserve medical and personal excellence.